All right, let me just go ahead and welcome everybody. We're here a couple of minutes early. I am starting this technology StreamYard. I can see the comments people are making, but it's not appearing on my Facebook page. So unfortunately, Laura won't be able to see, but I want to welcome everybody. I'm here with the awesome Laura Shanley, who is the author of a book she wrote almost 30 years ago, Unassisted Childbirth. This was her first edition. There's a newer one out online. And between the two of us, we have over 60 years experience with home birth, in particular, unassisted childbirth. Let me hold this up again. The title is Unassisted Childbirth, and her website is unassistedchildbirth.com. And mine is a book I wrote in 1998 is Unassisted Home Birth. So my website is unassistedhomebirth.com. But I like to hold up my more recent one, Take Back Your Birth, Inspiration for Expectant Moms, because this gives you information on being ready just in case you are faced with a unexpected birth at home and natural birth and all that. So anyways, Laura and I were talking and we decided we just wanted to open this up for you to give you an opportunity to ask questions. And in this coronavirus crisis, there are a lot of women who are uneasy about giving birth in the hospital, or just more anxiety about their upcoming birth. So I really wanted to tap in, especially to your wisdom, Laura, about just how to be ready and what you can do to calm down and to kind of be ready. And we wanted to let you know that this is not a how-to. We're not here to give you advice, to instruct you as to how to do this. We're just here to offer encouragement and inspiration and just talk about birth in general. And I will be looking for any comments or questions that you have. We had a couple of questions come in and a couple of comments, so we'll talk about that throughout this. But first, I want to welcome Laura. Hi, Laura. How are you doing?
I'm good, Lynn. Thanks.
Great, great. This is causing us to change our lives temporarily, and we don't know for how long. So there are a lot of unexpected and unusual things going on in our culture. So the first question that someone brought up was to talk about safety of home birth. What worries people is that it's going to be unsafe if they have to give birth at home. I don't know if you have any comments about safety, comments or research, or what is your feeling when someone says to you, oh my gosh, it's a little unsafe to be giving birth at home?
Well, my writing has always focused on the 3 reasons why I believe that birth can sometimes be problematic. And the first is extreme poverty. If you don't have access to food, clean water, proper housing, your life is going to be problematic. Your birth may be problematic. So when you see women in third world countries that are struggling or having problems in birth, yes, if you were in a state of trauma, and certainly if you're starving to death and drinking dirty water, that can cause problems, but that doesn't mean that birth itself is inherently unsafe. So if you are not living in a third world country and you're not starving to death, okay, that's one, you will have a better chance of having a safe birth. So that's one thing. And most of us here aren't in that condition. The second thing I've focused on is outside medical intervention. So many people think, oh, thank God I was in the hospital because such and such happened. And if I wouldn't have been there, my baby would have died or I would have died. And I hear that all the time. And so what a lot of us who have studied birth for many years realize is that what they're doing in the hospital is really not based on science. They're interfering with birth every step of the way, telling you what position to be in, telling you how long when you should go into labor, how long you can be in labor before they intervene. So many things every step of the way that they are controlling. And it really is like if you're having sex, and Michel Audin talks about, who is a French obstetrician, he also calls himself a midwife. And he says, imagine you're having sex and everything is flowing and it feels really good and you feel like you're kind of in that zone. And then suddenly someone comes in the room, taps you on the shoulder and says, "What's your social security number?" And it brings you out of that sort of intuitive, artistic, creative state and into your rational, critical mind, which is where you don't want to be when you're giving birth. So it's like any creative act, you need to sort of get into that zone. So one of the things that they're doing in the hospital, in addition to interfering by telling you what to do or what position to be in or how long you have for each stage of labor, they're also just interfering. And I read an account of a woman who said every 15 minutes that they would come in and check dilation, and she felt like she was getting into this zone and everything was going beautifully. But every 15 minutes, bang, she's out of it. She's out of that zone. So and so privacy is very important. So what people are thinking is happening in the hospital, that, oh, thank God someone was there. Well, that may not have happened if they hadn't have been there. I read that in a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Robert Sapolsky, that if a pregnant monkey if someone comes into the room of a pregnant monkey, just their presence makes the heart rate of their fetus go down. So when people are saying, "Oh, my baby's heart rate went down. Thank God I was in the hospital so they could do a C-section." Well, if you were given privacy, if you were relaxed and allowed to proceed normally and naturally, you don't know that baby's heart rate would have gone down. And a heart rate going down isn't necessarily a cause for concern anyhow. But so I think people need to question everything they believe about birth. And so in continuing with my the second cause of problems. Yeah, so birth should not be interfered with every step of the way. Women need to be able to just allow that process to work. So when you're in the hospital, they're doing things that can actually cause birth to become problematic. The third thing that I focus on, and the main thing that I focus on, is inside interference. So that when you are in a state of fear, you trigger the fight. You're telling your body it's in a dangerous situation. And so your body wants to use all its resources to save your life. So it shuts down labor. It shuts down digestion. Blood and oxygen stop flowing to the uterus. Just like blood and oxygen stop flowing to your face when you're afraid, you turn white as a ghost because your body thinks you need that blood and oxygen in your arms and legs to fight this danger or run. So the uterus of a frightened woman in labor literally doesn't have fuel. It's literally white. And so babies get stuck and women have pain. So I really work a lot with overcoming fear and trusting that the same intelligence that knew how to grow a baby, an egg and a sperm into a human being, knows how to complete the process. It doesn't suddenly abandon us in labor, like you're on your own. No, you're not on your own. That consciousness is still there. It is guiding you just as a cat is guided in labor. It knows how to give birth. Animals know how to give birth, but they generally seek seclusion. And so this is why I think even if you decide you want to give birth in the hospital, it wasn't my choice, but the calmer you can be and the more trusting you can be, the better your birth will be. So now I have your original question about, safety.
Safety. Safety. And you bring up a lot of points that people need to know just about birth in general, to not be frightened, to be calm, and to just, really go with the flow of the moment. I really believe that being in the present moment and just paying attention and trying to center yourself and that inner peace, and that you can do a lot of work on yourself rather than letting the outside environment tell you what to do, what the rules are, how to give birth, what should happen. And as you were talking, it just makes me think that every woman who is pregnant should be ready to give birth on their own, in an emergency, unexpected, without any attendance. And we take for granted in our very materialistic, very advanced medically culture that we will have somebody there for us, and we may not. Remember the fires in California. There have been earthquakes. There have been hurricanes. There have been blizzards and snowstorms, impassable roads. We have these little examples of communities that might be cut off from getting to a facility. So I was thinking if I had one thing to carry around in my car to be ready for birth, it would be a towel. I feel that there's two things you need to do in an emergency. Catch the baby, don't let it, come out on a hard surface. Gently catch your baby and have a towel to keep it warm, to keep it close to you. You can use your arms as a towel. But that was just the one thing that I thought, if someone says, what one thing would you want to have nearby? Not a scissors to cut the cord or I don't know, but I just thought of a towel. What would you think you would like to have to be ready in case of an emergency?
I guess, I probably have to agree with you, because I think that certainly, you don't need to cut the cord. I've seen, I remember watching a movie and a baby was unexpectedly born unassisted and somebody's shouting, cut the cord, cut the cord. Like, no, you don't ever have to cut the cord. It'll eventually fall off. But, basically, the only thing you need is the mom and the baby. You don't really, if you can truly relax. You look at all these stories of women unexpectedly giving birth in cars and, outside the hospital when they weren't planning to. And one thing I've noticed, because I researched this a few years ago, and in almost every case, it was mom and baby are doing well, and like miraculous. And then, or, the firemen got there at the last minute, or the EMTs, we named the baby after the fireman. But it's like, and they're just amazed, like, oh my God, how did this happen? There was no one there and it just went beautifully. And it's like, well, maybe it went beautifully because there was no one there. I write in my book about that there's some tribal women, they say that they're so relaxed that some of them give birth while they're sleeping, because they've just been brought up to believe that this is a natural process. And so they just let their bodies work. It's like, when your baby's in the womb, you don't have to figure out how to grow fingers and toes. And this week you're growing, this organ and that. There is an intelligence. And I think people think because we have sickness in the world or because we have death, that obviously there's no intelligence behind life, or if there is an intelligence, it's uncaring. And I think, no, we need to learn to work with this intelligence, but it is definitely there. And sometimes I think, I just the complexity of the human body and everything that happens just when you take a breath, there's some intelligence that created all that. And I don't see it as like a man in the sky type of thing, but I see it as some incredibly loving intelligence that is behind and within all life. And the more we learn to trust that, the better our lives will be and the better our births will be. And I think now with all of this going on, and I think a lot of people are sort of forgetting that they're my granddaughter is off to the side, that the magic is still there. There is still, this isn't going to be the end of the world. We will get through this. There are lessons to be learned. We still do have inner help. It's not, we have to just focus on the positive. And I've seen so much magic in my life and so many miraculous things happen that I no longer doubt that there is this loving intelligence that is with me all the time and that is helping me. And so, that's what I'm doing now, is just focusing on what I have. And I think, every time you focus on, being loving and loving yourself, there's actually a chemical reaction in your body. You are producing positive chemicals every time you think happy thoughts, and the same with every time you think fearful thoughts. So if you really want to strengthen your immune system, and we do have immune systems, I don't believe that just things can just attack us at any time. And I do think we have immunity, but it can be compromised if we are in a continual state of fear. And so I think, focus on the positive, find the joy in your life every day, and be happy and do things that make you happy. And that's the best way you can strengthen your immune system, whether just for your day-to-day life or for your birth.
Yeah, that's great. I agree with all of that, Laura. The gratitude, the trust, and that will bring you a long way in having a good birth. I want to take a few moments to welcome everybody. We have Cheryl, Penny, Cambry, Bob, Ivana. Happy birthday, Ivana. I think your birthday is tomorrow. Clarissa and Melanie. So thanks for joining us so far. If you have any questions, please, or comments, please put them in. We're here for you. We're here to address any questions or comments or concerns that you might have, or just any crazy ideas that we can help address. And we're here again to help encourage and inspire people to not be afraid of birth, and no matter what you're planning or what you're doing. And as Laura was talking, I'm thinking about how we need to sift through what is propaganda, what is true biology of childbirth, what is true biology. And I think there's still a lot of people out there who run with the fear, run with ideas about pain. I recently met a doctor in January on a vacation, and he's an internal medicine expert, and he's the father of 3 grown children. And the topic of birth came up. And of course, I don't really tell people about my births unless it comes out. And he's like, oh, that's not something I want to see. Every time my wife had the baby, she would go off in the room, and I didn't want to see it. And I was just kind of quietly shocked. Here he is, a doctor, and he didn't want to see it. He felt that giving birth was woman's work. And our culture is wonderful today. More fathers are involved. More fathers are getting involved in the birth, watching it, being excited over it. I remember my mother is passed away, and the story about my birth was that my father had a camera. This was 1962. He wanted to be there to witness it and participate and watch. And the doctor told him, oh, no, this is not anything you need to see. Just go ahead and wait in the waiting room, and we will let you know when the baby's born. And I can just imagine his feelings just of resignation and just having to go and wait while they did what they needed to do with my mother. So I don't know. I lost my train of thought. But being prepared and knowing, if you know about birth and the biology of how it should happen, it really knowledge is power in a lot of ways. It really can take away, like, okay, I've studied different cultures. Okay, I'm going to watch positive birth videos of people who have had effortless childbirths. And I hope you don't think it's gross. I mean, I once wanted to show my kids in high school, 14, 15-year-old, I wanted to invite the neighborhood girls, hey, when Ricky Lake's Business of Being Business of Being Born came out, and another mom said, oh, I don't think that my daughter should really see that. And I thought, wow, this is educational, to actually see birth, to not be afraid of it, to not think it's gross, to not think it's X-rated, to be comfortable with your body, to be comfortable with breastfeeding. And that's another thing that maybe you could talk about, oxytocin. Every time we can have dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, we are a happier culture. However, let me qualify that, not by being addicted, dopamine hits on addictions, but I'm talking about physical exercise, bonding, the hormones of bonding, the hormones of birth, letting it all play out, of breastfeeding, of the mom, dad, and the baby. And one thing that you did mention was being more quiet, being more simple, just having silence and privacy. And I fully believe, even when the baby is born, you don't need all the relatives and the grandparents coming over right away.
Yeah.
On your little household immunity, your little bubble, and have a baby moon and have long periods of time. And one thing, those of you watching who are not in the pregnancy years, one thing that you could do to help new moms adjust in your neighborhood. For example, some of you might have Facebook neighborhood discussion groups. Find out who in your local area is pregnant, and maybe offer to make a meal and leave it by the door so that you don't have to keep your 6 feet distance. So maybe you can provide a meal to somebody. Those of you breastfeeding support people, maybe you can have phone conversations with women to calm them down. You know, be isolated, be in your home. You can be on the phone, and you can be getting great support if you're a new mom about breastfeeding, about, oh, the baby is not sleeping. Oh, the baby looks jaundiced, or, oh, you don't have to pick up and go to the doctor for advice. Finding other women who've experienced this and friends can go a long way to help you support you and to calm you down in those early stages.
Right. Right.
So, do you agree with that, with oxytocin, that the
Oh, yeah.
importance of keeping a calm birth and a calm sense of mind and those hormones?
I mean, basically, your body can either produce birth hormones or stress hormones. So when you are producing stress hormones, your body is shutting off the birth hormones. So it's shutting off the flow of oxytocin and estrogen. And they've found that with animals, tests they've done, that if an animal is stressed, they can literally stop the flow of estrogen. So, and you need estrogen. Women talk about the possibility of hemorrhaging after birth. You need estrogen in order to close up the cervix. So if you've just given birth, and this is like you're talking about, and everybody's there, and everybody's, and you're out of that bubble,
Yeah.
That is literally affecting the flow of oxytocin and the flow of estrogen, especially if you're, say, in the hospital and they're like, oh, they start to panic. Well, the placenta hasn't come out yet, or the placenta has come out, or that they, whatever panicking they're doing, whatever aspect of birth they're panicking over, your body reacts to that by shutting off the flow of oxytocin and estrogen. And so if you truly want a safe birth and you want the cervix to close back up, then you want to be in a calm state. It isn't enough just to say, okay, baby's here now. I knew a woman that, like, okay, baby was born and now she's getting phone calls. She needs to come sign her loan documents. And so placenta's still inside her. She goes to sign the loan documents and placenta doesn't come out,
Right.
So she went into the hospital where a doctor pulled the placenta out. So, you want to continue to be in that relaxed state so that the hormones are continuing to flow. And then if you are in that relaxed state, then you'll continue to produce oxytocin and you'll continue to produce estrogen. And then your body can complete the process and close back up so that you're not hemorrhaging. So I think people just underestimate how sensitive their bodies are to their thoughts and how staying calm, just what that does to your body. It basically just allowing your body to do what it needs to do. And as long as you can kind of step aside and let it work, it will work. Now is not the time. I'm not saying like the intuitive, creative mind is superior to the rational, critical mind. I'm saying that in birth, now is not the time for the rational, critical mind to be there. It's there, but it's sort of in the background. It's sort of stepping to the side so that it's just the same with like going to sleep. If you are in a room where there's loud noises and bright lights, and on top of that, you're stressed thinking about whatever it is that's going on in your life, that adrenaline is pumping through your system. You and your body thinks it's doing you a favor. It's keeping you awake because there's a danger that you need to stay awake for. And so you don't produce the chemicals that you need in order to go to sleep. So the same thing happens in birth. Your body knows exactly the right cocktail, some people say, to produce, to give birth, to complete the process safely. Your rational critical mind is on there. It's like turning on a light and blasting the noise, and it's going to keep you awake. It's going to keep you from giving birth safely. So don't underestimate the power of your own mind and the power of love. And, love, you can feel it in your body. When you love somebody, you can feel it. And there is a chemical reaction that's going on. When you sit down to share a meal with someone, you're producing oxytocin. So it's not something that just happens during sex and birth. It's there a lot of the time if you're in that happy, relaxed state. So really, the best thing you can do to ensure a good birth is be happy.
Yeah.
Focus on happy things. I tell people, if you're a singer, sing. If you're a painter, paint. Or if you're a dancer, dance. Whatever can get you into that zone, that your body will literally have a chemical response to that will help you. And being surrounded by people who believe that birth is inherently dangerous and inherently painful, it actually has a physiological effect on your body that is detrimental.
Yeah. And being in that relaxed state might take a little extra work for people in today's culture. There are over 3 million people applied for unemployment. People are losing jobs. Like I said the other day, 2 of my daughters recently lost their jobs. And people are afraid of course, getting the coronavirus, and people are being tested and you're awaiting test results. And so you might have to work a little extra hard at being relaxed. And that's just what you're called to do. You're called to deal with your life, really. And some people are going to be able to deal with it better than others. But I do know that by shutting out a lot that's going on, you don't have to watch all the news. You don't have to take it all into your life. And I want to say hi to Jade. She recently joined us. And I want to mention Clarissa. My last home birth, the placenta didn't come out right away, and paramedics were new on the job and never delivered and were more nervous than me. Basically, this before I continue, Clarissa had 4 C-sections, and her last baby was born at home, but there was a really hoopla of firefighters. They created a crisis and a circus. She writes, I think their energy prevented me from delivering the placenta normally. The transfer to the hospital to have it removed was scary and more painful than the birth. And so with her next pregnancy, she is doing everything she can to avoid this. And what I would say is, even for women who had unexpected, unassisted birth, you don't need to call someone. It's a crisis. Help me, help me. You probably can just look around and process, what are you feeling? You're probably feeling, wow, what just happened? That was easier than I thought. So you can keep calm for a few moments. You don't have to hurry up and make a phone call. I had a very good friend down the street, 2005 or 2007. She had a baby at home, and the home birth went well. She wasn't planning on it. It was unexpected, but it was calm. And then when she dialed the number and called, the paramedics came and they treated it like it was an emergency. So other people have a mindset about birth, and sometimes it's not what your mindset is going to be. And the other thing I wanted to say is, if you just do a little birth research, you will learn what the ABGAR, right? ABGAR. There are 5 indications. When a newborn baby is born, you're looking to see, is it breathing? What's the color of the baby? Might be purple when it's born. Some people don't know that your baby will be born and it's purple, and you think, oh my gosh, it's going to suffocate. So you can, pregnant women can learn on your own what to do in an emergency or an unexpected situation. And just because it's unexpected does not mean it's dangerous. Another classic book that came out, I don't know if anything was written in recent times, but Dr. Gregory White, Emergency Childbirth. And basically it's just a couple of pages in there, what to do if you're at home and you have an unexpected birth. And he said any 8-year-old could handle it. And here's what you do. So if you want to become a birth prepper, you're planning a hospital birth and you want to become a birth prepper, go ahead and maybe purchase a copy of Emergency Childbirth.
Right. I think, that a common mistake is people doing too much rather than doing too little. And even some of I haven't read Emergency Childbirth, but I know that a lot of times women in those situations are told, okay, don't do anything, basically, that now, I know some people feel comfortable taking CPR classes, that I didn't, but some people want to, they're afraid they might have to resuscitate the baby, which generally babies who are not drugged don't have the same problems. You hear about babies that are kind of real sleepy when they come out, or they don't seem very responsive. And in a lot of cases, that's because they are feeling the effects of an epidural. So your chances of that happening aren't as great if you've had a natural birth. But I think, just, that here again, just not doing too much, not feeling like, okay, now I have to do this and this and this and this and this. It's more staying out of the way, let your body do it. And then, put your baby to the breast or hold the baby, whatever.
Mm-hmm. I think that our culture makes birth a big deal to justify big expenses. I believe it costs about $20,000 to have a hospital vaginal birth and close to $50,000 for a C-section. So when we think of birth, we think, not you and I and many of the listeners, but in general, people in our culture think having a birth, a baby, involves and requires all of this fancy medical equipment and expertise, and it really doesn't. And again, I do want to qualify that the woman seeking out a home birth or an unassisted childbirth experience is most often going to be more educated about birth, about what would happen. Am I going to take responsibility? My baby could die at home. How would I deal with that? I could have complications. So it really sends those of us who choose this type of birthing into a big research and at least for me, research, educational, reading, and just devouring stuff about childbirth. So welcome, Tasha. She says, thanks for doing this, ladies. My high school friend's daughter just gave birth. Mama and baby were separated for 2 days by the hospital. Yikes.
Wow.
It breaks my heart that they are pretty much quarantining you. You walk into the hospital and you're almost quarantined, or you're so the coronavirus protocol is already starting. So I would encourage women to start thinking along a different path, different possibilities. I like to use the word possibilities. What are your possibilities? And so we can talk a little bit about rights. You have the right to have a baby at home. You have the right to say no. You have the right to pick up and leave the hospital and quote unquote fire your doctor. You have the right. They might be very assertive with you, and it might seem like you have to do what they're telling you. But being pregnant and being a mother, it requires you to be more assertive in life and to make your own decisions and your choices. And for some people that's hard, but I just want you to think about that you have possibilities, you have options, you have rights, and you have choices. And giving birth at home, I believe, is a human right in all 50 states. As far as midwifery, that's different. And I just wanted to say a couple things about safety. I looked something up online like an hour and a half ago about safety. And first of all, there are about, it's estimated 1% of all births are home births in this country. Now, of the home births, which most of which will be midwives, I believe that maybe just 1/5 or 20% of the 1% is selected unassisted births, or the other word they call free birth. Free birth is a very common word. Laura uses unassisted childbirth. That's the title of her book and her website. I use unassisted home birth, and there's also free birth. And there are little minor differences. I know that the free birth community, it talks about you can have a free birth in a hospital because you are free and having the birth on your terms. And whereas I know Laura and I believe free birth, an unassisted birth, is a birth without an attendant, a paid medical professional. You could have friends there, but we don't have to split hairs about what exactly, but you will hear the word free birth. But I wanted to say about safety, the Midwife Alliance of North America came out last year in March of 2019, claiming that they have done the most comprehensive statistical study, and they found that of 17,000 home births, planned home births with a midwife, that only 1% transferred to the hospital, and that was usually because the woman wasn't progressing to her likability or what she thought, and she transferred. So there weren't emergency reasons why a lot of people were transferring, but they said only 53 out of 1,000 babies are born by C-section that have planned a home birth versus the rest of the culture. So that's about 5%, where the rest of the culture is at about 31%. So that would be 247 out of 1,000 end up with a C-section who are planning hospital births. So that's another thing that triggers PTSD in me. And if anything, I could tell any woman or tell my daughters, do everything you can to avoid a C-section. Anything you can. Okay, certainly they are needed, but there's so much you can do throughout your pregnancy to set you on a path. And again, some people would disagree with me on that, but I'm very anti C-section, and my heart goes out to those women who have had a C-section. In fact, some of the women listening today have had C-sections, but they've progressed. They've learned that maybe the first baby was a C-section, and then they've gone on. And there's usually a progression. When you've had a home birth with a midwife, or a birth just with you and your husband or your chosen people, you do not really want to go back to the hospital. You do not want a C-section. And so that's very interesting to look. Laura and I, for over 60 years combined, we have noticed in almost every case, if people end up having a chosen, planned, unassisted a birth at home, even a midwife birth at home, they do not want to go to the hospital. So there's talk to these women about it. And anyway, so I've been blabbing on. What else would you like to say?
Oh, what else would I like to say? Well, I was going to comment on the just about the placenta and what some people think of as retained placenta. And I think, according to, I know in Colorado, if the placenta isn't out within an hour of the birth, I believe, and I haven't been reading the laws lately, but I know at least at one time, and maybe it still is, that then they're supposed to transfer the woman to the hospital. And I knew a woman that I knew gave birth unassisted accidentally. The midwife showed up about 45 minutes later, and the placenta wasn't out yet. And she was like, okay, then we got to get it out now, because otherwise we'll have to transfer you. She pulled out half the placenta and went to the hospital. She hemorrhaged and she went to the hospital. And I feel like I hear from so many women that will tell me, placenta came out 6-7 hours later. I was in touch with a woman who told me her placenta came out 24 hours later. And then, and here again, this is something that each person has to decide for themselves. When people say, well, is it okay that my placenta, it's like, no, I don't answer those kind of questions. That you need to make your own decision. But I'm just saying stories that I've heard. A woman wrote to me, she sent me a birth announcement, and she said, I gave birth outside. It was a beautiful experience. 3 days later, I delivered the placenta and we buried it under a tree. So, so I think so many things that people think are, it's been an hour, my placenta's not out. Oh no, so much of it is if you can just relax. And I just think so many of these laws or these rules for, when the placenta is supposed to be out. First of all, it can vary. Some of these things vary by state. In Colorado, if your labor isn't progressing and your water's been broken for maybe 12 hours, they're supposed to transfer you to the hospital. If it's been 24 hours, they're supposed to give you a C-section. In Oregon, where the laws are newer, they give women more time. So it's just, I think people just need to, do their own research, but not just believe that what the medical community is saying is gospel and that they know, and I am just a stupid woman and I don't know. No, I think, tap into your own wisdom, that we have that wisdom within us and we have that guidance within us. And yes, use your rational critical mind too. I did read some childbirth books when I was pregnant. I read Childbirth Without Fear by Grantley Dickreed, and I read Spiritual Midwifery by Ina May Gaskin. But for me, it wasn't a matter of becoming my own midwife. I did not see, okay, what do midwives do? And that's what I'm going to do. I had a different approach. I looked at what are the reasons why women sometimes have problems. And when I realized what those reasons were, extreme poverty, outside interference, and inside interference, then I worked on eliminating those things so that I could just have the birth the way it was meant to be. That's how I looked at it. So I did not really become my own midwife. I did not. I never checked dilation. I never timed contractions. And another thing I wanted to touch on is people think, oh, well, babies, at least if you give birth in the hospital, then, your baby will most likely survive. And every 20 to 30 minutes, a baby is stillborn in an American hospital. There is no guarantee that if you go to the hospital, and especially these days with what's happening now and all the interventions and, what's happening now from what I'm reading in New York, what they're doing and not allowing partners into the delivery room. And, I was reading one doctor said, that we're going to test every pregnant woman that comes to the hospital. Now, this is maybe just that hospital or just that doctor, but he said, we're going to test them. If she's positive, C-section and separation of mom and baby. Wow. And so I do think, there are articles all over the news right now, Washington Post, and God, I've said that I read one in the Daily Beast that I posted, but really they're in many newspapers, CNN, newspapers and websites, how more and more women are turning to home birth right now. And so I think I'm sorry that it took something like this for women to look to home birth, but I'm glad that women are looking into home birth. And I think but you can't wait for society to say, yes, this is okay. You're safe. We've done these studies and society, the mainstream is always way behind, and there were women, 80 years ago when they were told 80, 90, every woman has to be x-rayed when she's pregnant. And then eventually they saw, that's what doctors were saying. And so, but eventually they saw, oh no, that isn't good for women, or every woman must have an episiotomy. And now they're not so keen on episiotomies. So, we can't wait for the mainstream to approve of our choices. We have minds, we can think for ourselves and do our own research.
Right. That's true. That's true. And so, all right, maybe we can wrap this up in a couple of minutes. And if people enjoyed this, we could, certainly do it again at some point. And I just want to say that the unexpected, what we have going on right now, the unexpected it shouldn't be cause for us to be alarmed. It should be a cause for us to contemplate, well, what are the opportunities here? What I'm thinking the simpler life is not bad. We are at home, we're cooking more, and we're having to just slow our lives down. My husband he's involved in different activities, 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. He's out in various activities. And so he's the one that's mostly affected by this and shocked, having to work from home and change his life. So our lives are changing because of this, and it's not a reason to be alarming. It's a reason for opportunities and exploration. We can be explorers here. We are exploring new ways of living, new things about how we can live our life and things like that. And so I want to thank you, Laura. This has been a lot of fun. Would you like to do this again, maybe, if people want to do it?
Definitely.
Okay. I think that this 4:00 time worked out better. I attempted last night by myself to try it out at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and the internet was just, the website wouldn't make it through. So I'm thinking this might be a better time on this web host. And so, my concluding remark would just be ready for anything. What do you need to do to be ready? And so what are your concluding marks, Laura?
I would say trust yourself. You're smarter than you realize. There is more to you than just your rational, critical mind. There's parts of you that you may not have discovered yet, but they are there. I was never that much of I never felt very spiritual until I really got pregnant. And then I did feel sort of that inner guidance, and especially in labor, just even what position to get in. I never felt like I was alone, even though I've given birth several times alone. And so, so I think, we have inner help, and trust that, use your rational, critical mind and your intuitive mind, believe in your own abilities, and don't forget that, there still is magic in the world. There's magic within us. We can tap into that, however you define magic, spirituality, God, this is all happening. It doesn't mean that we've been forgotten. It doesn't mean that the rest of our lives are going to be ruined. We're going to get through this, and we just have to keep the faith and focus on the positive.
All right. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I know you're really busy. You've got places to go and people to see. So thank you. And we'll do this again. Bye.
Thanks, Lynn. Bye-bye.